was actually overthrown by the Egyptian military. But the United States, of course, you remember, it said there was no coup in Cairo. Was there a coup in your view?
Yes, most definitely. To me, the way forward means metamorphosis, changing, meaning that we're changing from one form to another. And for us to be able to achieve that, we first have to address where we came from, what led us to where we are today, and then find a way to correct those mistakes. Without acknowledging what got us there in the first place, there is no way we'll be able to solve and chart a way forward for Zimbabwe. There are three fundamental things that led us to where we are today. Number one was the legitimacy of the government. Number two was misgovernance, gross misgovernance. And number three, I would say, was gross violation of human rights. Those are the things that got us to where we are, where we failed to get recognition from the international community because our electoral process was flawed. So that needs to be fixed. That needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed today. Misgovernance, definitely corruption, and everything else that goes with it needs to be weeded out. And you can only do that if you have an institution, if you have a government that is for the people, by the people, that is put in place correctly. Gross human rights violations, millions of us are out here struggling on a day-to-day basis to make ends meet. It's not by choice, but it's because of persecution. Political activists have been murdered, have been tortured, imprisoned. Right now, as long as those issues are not addressed holistically, we're just pushing the can down the road. Nothing positive will come out. This change we're talking about will never happen. We cannot recycle plastic and then call it metal.
I see. Well, we have more time, of course, to discuss more about that. What about Rutendo? What do you think about the way forward? You have a man who obviously was the founding leader of independent Zimbabwe, a man who happened to be part of a club that called itself revolutionaries. That revolutionaries, in fact, do not retire, they do not leave power. And the leader of that club was a man who happened to be president for Libya for 42 years. He was called Brother Leader, King of African Kings. And of course, he was the man in Tripoli. You know how he ended. This man you see here, as Chris said earlier, did not expect to be a former president. He expected to be the late president. But now he happens to be the former president, something that also Mobutu Sese Seko of DRC didn't expect actually to experience. Where do you see Zimbabwe going? Where is it going to? I mean, what do you think really needs to be done in order to get a new Zimbabwe that reflects the concerns of your generation?
Thank you very much. I'd like to say that, first of all, as young people, we need to acknowledge that we have a huge part to play. We need to complete the transition. We don't own this transition. I say this because we cannot claim victory that yes, President Mugabe is gone simply because we did it as young people. We need to understand that this was a controlled, managed uprising, and we know that the military used the frustrations of the young people, the activists who were saying that President Mugabe must go. But I don't think young people were just saying President Mugabe must go alone. We were saying we need a complete transition where we can say at the end of the day there is free, there's democratic elections in Zimbabwe, there is respect of human rights, there is accountable governance, and young people are owners of their destiny, because it's good on paper for ZANU-PF to be saying that, or for any government to be saying that, but as young people, are we actually owning this transition? So this is where we are. So for us to move forward as young people, we need to actually act, not just put hashtags on social media or make noise about it, but are we willing to actually move forward and act and complete this transition so that another 37 years from now we won't have another sector of the war veterans who we respect so much for bringing this independence to us, but we won't have them saying that we owned it, we did it, but we want to say that we have created the Zimbabwe we want as young people.
I see. Thank you. Now, Dr. Frank Bruni, what about you? You belong, of course, to the ruling ZANU-PF. You're a life member, correct?
Correct.
Are you proud of the recent events that brought about a different guard? Is this what you would call change? Someone said, in fact, what Zimbabwe needs probably is trajectory change. But this seems to be a sort of pious coup. Can this really bring about the sort of change that the vast majority of Zimbabwe are looking for, just in the same way that Madame Rutendo, addressed it?
Absolutely, it's change, and you can see the change happening as we speak right now. But to address the primary question here, what is the way forward for Zimbabwe? The way forward for Zimbabwe from a ZANU-PF perspective is, number one, economic recovery, addressing our economic fundamentals and ensuring that we put in place sound economic policies that attract investment, and ensuring that things like property rights are protected, investors are welcome into Zimbabwe to do business, improve the ease of doing business in Zimbabwe. The second thing that the new government and the new renewed ZANU-PF is going to do is to ensure that there's affordable access to healthcare for all Zimbabweans. We are no longer going to see a situation where Zimbabweans have to board on planes, cross borders to look for healthcare. The infrastructure is there. We just need to put our house in order. The third thing that you're going to see is realigning our Electoral Act with the Constitution of Zimbabwe to ensure that the next elections that are taking place in the next 7 to 8 months are in compliance with the law, with the fundamental law of Zimbabwe, the Constitution of Zimbabwe. I know that my comrades here on the left side, especially MDC, they have been saying they need reforms, they need reforms. But those reforms must be within the law. And the primary thing that we need to do is to ensure that the Electoral Act of Zimbabwe is in conformity with the new constitution. And that's a priority for the new government and for the ruling party. We also need to get rid of corruption. And we have seen the new president, President Emerson Mnangagwa, hitting the ground running. He's dealing with corruption, and any corruption that has been in Zimbabwe for the past 17 years is going to be a thing of the past. Internally, as a political party, you have already seen the democratization of the ruling party, and that's going to continue. And that democratization is also going to expand to the whole country. And of course, we need national reconciliation, not just within the party itself, but across the nation. Those are some of the fundamental changes that you're going to see. But back to your last question, yes, this is change. President Mnangagwa is already showing that he's different from President Mugabe in terms of how he's executing his office as President of the Republic.
How has he done that so far? Are you talking about talking the talk?
Absolutely. So far he's talking of a leaner government. We don't need a bloated government, that's number one. Number two, I've already alluded to the fact that he's already dealing with corruption. You've seen senior government officials, former government officials being arrested, and now they are going through the legal processes. This is going to expand. You've seen, everyone was complaining in Zimbabwe about police corruption, for example. Nowadays, that's a thing of the past already. And he's dealing with those things. He is consulting both within the party and across sectors in Zimbabwe, including the opposition. He has invited them to discuss with them their views on how best we can together move forward as Zimbabwe. Those are fundamental changes, quite different from President Mugabe.
I see. Thank you very much. And let's welcome, of course, Dr. Arikana Chongoli Kwawo, the African Union Ambassador to the United States. Sorry about the traffic problems that we gather that you encountered. And I guess my very simple question to you really, how do you look at, or do you see the way forward for Zimbabwe, at least from the African Union perspective? You said, for example, that there was no coup in Harare, and yet, about, more or less the same kind of event took place several years ago in Egypt, and the African Union, in fact, condemned that event, that it called a coup, and demanded that the soldiers restore constitutional order. This was Egypt's perhaps only ever democratically elected president, mostly. And of course, the United States, for its purpose, did not see a coup in Cairo. Do you believe from the US? Because there are a lot of people who actually think there was a coup.
Well, you have to look at the constitution of Zimbabwe. There was a possibility that there could be instability in the market. According to the Zimbabwean constitution, the army could step in the event there's a possibility of instability within the country. They acted within the constitution to do that. So there was no coup, but there was provision within the constitution for the army to do that because of the condition on the ground at that time. And they moved in swiftly, according to the constitution, and addressed the issue. And we're just so glad that Zimbabwe has set an example for Africa, how we don't have to kill each other. There was no looting, no killing. It was a peaceful transition, and it's a good day, and it's a new day in Zimbabwe. And from the African Union side, we are very proud and pleased that Africa in general, and Zimbabwe is leading the way, that we have matured as communities from a political point of view. So yes, Zimbabwe is a success story, and I reiterate, there was no coup.
I know that I remember General Constantino Chiwenga said that the army did not want to see Zimbabwe become another Somalia. He did not want to see Zimbabwe become another Central African Republic, and what have you. He could probably have also added, he did not want to see Zimbabwe become South Sudan. But what about some people who actually say it was really not because there was going to be instability in Zimbabwe, but rather that the army felt that they were going actually to lose privileges because Dr. Grace Mugabe was poised perhaps to actually take over the ruling party and end up purging some of those military officers.
Well, it's always wonderful to listen to Monday morning quarterbacks. The issues are what they are. And so we can analyze it till the cows come home. The point is, there were some situations that occurred within a short period of time, and the army saw possibility of instability. They invoked a certain statute of the constitution, moved in swiftly and addressed the issue, and we are where we are in Zimbabwe, in a very peaceful Zimbabwe, which is going to move forward in the manner that it should be, just like my brother here has reiterated.
Very interesting. Then Moyo, what about the opposition perspective? What do you expect to happen? You're supposed to be having elections next year. I suppose the constitution requires that the elections are held before September, is that correct?
That's correct.
So what do you see? Do you look forward to having, perhaps for the first time in many years, according to some people, an election that would be free, fair, transparent, credible, and verifiable?
Not without the necessary electoral reforms. I mean, those electoral reforms need to be in place for that to happen. The reason that they've not been free, fair, and credible is because the situation on the ground is not allowed for that. We need a new independent electoral body. That is the trust of all the stakeholders. The current one does not have the trust of all the stakeholders. It is not independent. We need the UN supervision of the elections. We cannot continue counting on ZANU-PF's friends to come and monitor the elections and decide that they were free and fair. We need an impartial body, somebody who's independent, to come in and do that. We cannot afford Zimbabwe to be a military state. We need the military confined to the barracks where they belong, as per our constitution. Right now, we have a weak president in Mnangagwa. He's serving at the pleasure of the military. We cannot say that whatever he's saying right now is really from him and is what he's gonna do. Talk is cheap on paper. Yes, he can say all those things. Mugabe promised 2 million jobs in 2013 to lure voters for him. And what did we have? We ended up with 4 million vendors on the streets. So we cannot buy that. The diaspora needs to have a vote. We as Zimbabweans outside who have been pushed by the government, the private government, if they are serious about legitimate elections, we should be included in those elections. It is not reinventing the wheel. Other countries, our own neighbors, South Africa, Mozambique, Botswana, they allow for their citizens to vote outside the country. It's not impossible. It's just the willpower. So we need a free media, an open media. Without all those reforms being in place, there is nothing that is going to change here.
Talking about the foreign media, I gather that the Herald itself right now, as we talk, is very free. Have you heard about that?
That's a new one. But hopefully, we know that right now, Mnangagwa is going to do whatever it takes to sweet talk people, to try and look like he's on the good side, so that people can vote for him. It's their system, that's how they've played it all along. And they've managed to hoodwink a lot of people, but now this change has to be real, because the masses came out in their thousands and showed how happy they were for Mugabe to come down. The power should now transfer to the people and not to a few individuals in ZANU-PF to determine the future of the country.
But was this really a mass uprising?
Well, it could have been that if the army was genuine to it did allow the people to stand up and say what they needed to say, but nothing changed from there. They said, go back home, everything is cool.
What do you think, by the way, that the crocodile, we're talking about Emerson Mnangagwa, why do you think he's a weak president? What makes you think so?
Because
this is a man who ran away after being fired and actually issued a statement immediately from Johannesburg saying, I will return to Zimbabwe. And he's back in Zimbabwe.
Yes, where I bring in the weakness is because the government, the ZANU-PF government, we all know that the war veterans and the military are the key players. They are the ones who, even General Chiwenga himself has stood up and said, we're not going to allow any person without liberation or credentials to rule this country. So you can tell there immediately who has the power. Why wouldn't Mnangagwa, if he was a Democrat, come up and say, no, you cannot say those words because we're a democratic nation. We want to be all inclusive so that we can move forward. It shows who wields the power.
Was that the general who decided, for example, when you had a government of national unity, not to salute Prime Minister Changirai?
Yes, that's the same general. He decided he was going to do that and he was not reprimanded. So you can see that the military has the power. And until the people of Zimbabwe stand up and reclaim that power and put in a military whose purpose is what the Constitution demands it to be, we are always going to have this problem.
But isn't Mnangagwa a soldier himself? The last time I checked, he trained in Tanzania, he trained in Egypt, he trained in China. The man is a soldier.
He is a soldier, but right now he's a politician. He put the uniform aside, and that uniform should stay aside because we cannot have a military state.
So he probably can actually become a very effective leader.
Well, we will see. He has the opportunity to do the right thing so he can be voted by the people. If he is voted by the people in a free and fair election, we will salute him too.
Thank you. Rutendo, do you think that he would actually have an election that would have results that reflect at the end of the day the will of the people, the will of the voter? under this new dispensation? Or do you think it will be more of the same, where you have an election whose results reflect the will of those who count the vote?
I think anything is possible, but we shouldn't forget that we still have the same system that has not been willing to invite everybody to observe the elections. Whether they do them right or they don't, we don't have that proof, and we cannot speak to that. But unless the people actually become the voice, and we have observers that are open and that are welcome in Zimbabwe to observe the elections, then we can have a vote, or we can have an election that will say it was free and fair, as long as, like my brother said, the military has to stay in the barracks unless there is a threat to security in the country. Then it should be they should then come and interfere. But also at the same time, it's also very unfair to say that we'll have a free and fair election simply because of what the president has said for now, because words are cheap. Let's see what he has done. Let's see what he's willing to do for the people and within his own party, because he has said a lot of good things on paper where he was willing to arrest criminals. But are those criminals in his faction too? Are they also are they willing to lead by example as a leadership?
So you think that what you are seeing really is selective justice?
I would like to say until and unless we see non-selective, unless and until we see non-selective, where people are choosing to arrest people who are not from their factions or people who are not for them, then we can say surely we are seeing the rule of law in Zimbabwe being excellent the way we want to see it. But until we see that, we cannot buy anything, or we cannot take anything at face value that ZANU-PF is saying to the young people, because we have to be willing to analyze what they're saying as well. So unless we actually see that this is no longer to strengthen a faction, this is for the people, this is for the voices that are truly represented in Zimbabwe, then as a young person, I'm not willing to take anything at face value.
Dr. Gundi, what about you? Selective justice here? Earlier, of course, you said that the president has actually come out strongly against corruption and has even demonstrated, his resolve by arresting some former Minister of Finance and all that kind of stuff. But isn't that man part of what was called G40? The people that supported Dr. Grace Mugabe?
First and foremost, we haven't seen selective application of the law yet. As of now, the police and our law enforcement agencies have been given all power to investigate all forms of corruption or criminal activity and arrest everybody without fear or favor. There is no instruction from the president or the party to simply go after former G40 members or the opposition for that matter. So let's give the new government some time to perform and criticize them where criticism is worthy. Right now, my friend seems to be living in the past. He's making criticisms of what happened 17 years ago or 10 years ago. We are in a new political dispensation in Zimbabwe. And things are changing too fast, maybe for the opposition to even notice. Seriously.
But there are some people who are saying, frankly, in fairness, of course, to statements issued by the new president, Mnangagwa, that there are a lot of generals who are very, very corrupt. And there are a lot of people within ZANU-PF, which of course supported Mnangagwa
himself,
that are very corrupt.
Well,
And they have not been touched so far.
well, if anybody has evidence that somebody has been corrupt, bring that evidence to law enforcement agencies, and those people will be properly investigated, and the course of justice will take its course. And going back to something that the MDC here has been saying, that they want the United Nations to come and run elections in Zimbabwe. We are not Somalia. We are not coming out of civil war. We don't need the United Nations to come and run our elections. We are a sovereign state. We will invite the United Nations to come and observe our elections like we always do, including other bodies that are not biased, that are fair, and like I said in my opening remarks, the new president and ZANU-PF is determined to ensure that the next elections are going to be free, fair, transparent, and democratic.
How are they going to do that? Are you going to come up with a new electoral body that perhaps reflects the diversity, the political diversity of the stakeholders in Zimbabwe?
The electoral body in Zimbabwe is guided by the law. And like I've already said.
But how is it selected? How are the members of the commission chosen? And who chooses them?
Well, you're asking a question of what has already happened in the past. The electoral body was properly constituted according to the laws of Zimbabwe. Our parliament and the president, who was there, the former president, looked at the people who were nominated. They were properly constituted, and they are there and they are doing their jobs. What has been the biggest impediment right now is that the Electoral Act of Zimbabwe is not properly aligned with the new constitution, and that's a fundamental reform that needs to happen before the elections and as soon as possible. And I can assure you that from a ZANU-PF's perspective and from the new government, that's a top priority to ensure that our elections are run in accordance with the law. And for that matter, it's not the electoral body that goes and votes. Their job is to simply run the elections and count the votes. It's the people of Zimbabwe that vote. Unlike our comrades from the opposition, ZANU-PF right now is very busy pushing our people to go and register so that they can go and vote. That's a fundamental thing that needs to be done. Instead of criticizing the electoral body, mobilize your voters, mobilize your supporters to go and register so that they can go and vote. May I also take this opportunity to look at one more thing that my comrade here talked about, the diaspora vote. I believe the diaspora vote is important. It's guaranteed in the new constitution, and once the realignment of the Electoral Act and the constitution has been completed, that will become effective law. It now would then become a question of capacity for the new government to ensure that people in the diaspora are able to vote. But given that we only have 7 months between now and the elections, I can foresee some challenges in ensuring that everybody from all over the world is given the same opportunity to vote. And last, to my young friends here, ZANU-PF is a vibrant youth program. You're most welcome to come and
The young people who were supporting Dr. Grace Mugabe.
They're in jail.
Yes, some of them were supporting Dr. Mugabe and Dr. Grace Mugabe, and when we realized that the people who were in the G40, led by Dr. Grace Mugabe, were diverting from the fundamental principles of our party, we took corrective measures. And that has been addressed. It's going to be a thing of the past. We are re-democratizing our party. Even people that were in the G40, they are being welcomed back into the party, provided they are willing to toe the party line.
Let's go back to the electoral body. You seem to think that all the opposition need to do, or the other stakeholders need to do, frankly, is simply mobilize and organize votes. But the electoral body is very significant, and I'm sure you're following very closely
Exactly.
developments in Kenya,
Yep.
where you have an independent electoral boundaries commission, but actually happens to be only independent in name. Because at the end of the day, it is subordinate to the executive, led by President Uhuru Kenyatta. You know as well as I do that there was an election or an event in Kenya on August 8th. And the Supreme Court annulled that particular event or election and ordered the IEBC to open or access the opposition people to a server. And that was never opened. The server was never opened. As we talk now, it has never been opened. And to be honest with you, there is a lot of, I would say, a lot of belief that the person who won that election on August 8th in Kenya must be in that server. And it couldn't be Uhuru Kenyatta, because if it was Uhuru Kenyatta in that server would have been opened yesterday.
Yep.
So how can we be sure, frankly, that because you simply have an electoral body that has been established by, as per, the Zimbabwean constitution and what have you, that in fact it is independent enough to carry out an election whose results will reflect the will of the people, not those who actually count the votes.
Thank you. With all due respect to the Kenyan example, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is far different from what we saw in Kenya. And again, it's not the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission that votes. Their job is to simply ensure that they are running the elections in accordance to the laws of the land.
But they count the vote and announce the results.
Oh yes, and the opposition will be there to monitor every step of the way. And if you have been following events in Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission has been inviting all political players, all political parties in Zimbabwe throughout the process of ensuring that there's a new voter registration process. We're going to have a new voter roll. Right now, slightly over 3 million people have been registered. The target, of course, is 7 million. We're still far off from it, but we are heading towards it. And along the process, every political party in Zimbabwe and every interested party in Zimbabwe is being involved. They are invited to every meeting. They present their views where the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission needs to be directed by the political parties or to be advised. They're free to do that. And frankly, we shouldn't judge the outcome of the elections which are going to happen in 2018 before we even have the elections.
Thank you. Dr. Alikana Chomboli Kwao, how do you think that the AU can help Zimbabwe to conduct an election next year, frankly, that essentially is widely respected?
Well, let me start by saying I could not get off the stage without addressing the issue of calling President Mnangagwa weak. That is fact and being truthful. I understand your opposition, but we need to stick to facts. So I need to make that very clear. He is a very powerful man, very qualified to run Zimbabwe. If you look at his history, he's the last man in Zimbabwe that you would call weak. Just needed to make that clear. Let's also not forget the bigger picture. Yes, opposition, if you choose to be noisemakers, you're welcome to do so, and we'll keep it in the right way. A good thing has happened in Zimbabwe, and we cannot forget that. To see the masses of Zimbabwe come and speak loud and clear. Yes, the fight may have started within the ruling party, but the people who came out on the streets in masses were his Zimbabweans. Their voices were loud and clear, and President Mugabe heard them, and he did the right thing. Secondly, when we look at the manner in which the military operated, it takes a mature military, a disciplined military, to behave in the manner that they did. So you can poke holes and talk about there's corruption within the military. You know what? Granted, there could be some elements in anything, even when we strategize. We always leave room because human beings will be human beings. Rather than jump up and down and continue to poke holes on something that is yet to happen. Let's give this government a chance to show us what they're capable of doing before we start destroying something that hasn't even been created. And then what? What is the way forward? Let's be mature and responsible about how we begin to look at ourselves, not only as Zimbabweans, but as a mature African continent. We need to look at the situation independently, and at this time, we must support Zimbabwe fully. must support this government fully and see what they can deliver in the next 8 months, and let the Zimbabweans decide on their own, come 8 months, whether they want ZANU-PF or any of the other opposition parties. As the African Union, clearly we were monitoring this situation in Zimbabwe very closely, and making sure that, first and foremost, that no one was killed, that there was no bloodshed, and we're glad that that did not happen. Secondly, we will continue to monitor the situation in Zimbabwe, and when it comes to the elections, I can honestly tell you, peace and security is the busiest and most expensive department in the African Union. Over 60% of our budget goes to peace and security, and that includes good governance and democracy, not only in Zimbabwe, but in all of the continent. So yes, Zimbabwe is on our radar, it's on our big map, and East Black is one of the largest. We will be watching that. President Zimbabwe is very strong.
They're very strong, not weak. Let me ask you to respond to that, Dan, if you don't mind. Frankly, let me also remind you that back in 2008, the last time I checked, you actually won the election.
Yeah.
How did you do it?
Because we have the support of the Zimbabwean people. ZANU-PF lost support long ago. The problem we have right now here is that we have these people in ZANU-PF who think that the rest of Zimbabwe is foolish, that they are the only ones with the brains, that they are the only ones who can stand up and decide the future of the country. They talk the big talk. They have these conferences where they come and use their positions to be an extension of ZANU-PF, and not necessarily look into the will of the people and what the people of Zimbabwe are actually fighting for. We talk here of corruption, and we have a brother here saying, oh, there is no other corruption that's come up. We have $15 billion with the big B that the president, the former president himself, stood up and said this money was stolen. And who was there? Who are the people mining those diamonds where the money went missing? Chiwenga, the general, is right there with his company. Nangagwa is right there with his company. These are all the people that were mining those same diamonds that went missing, that today we are being told there is no corruption. What is happening right now is that the people of Zimbabwe are being drawn into a factional fight within ZANU-PF, where the corruption now is only being pointed at the G40 cabal and not the Lacoste faction. And we are not moving forward. If we are serious about moving Zimbabwe forward, because I think this is a waste of time. We've had these conferences over and over for a very long time. And every time the ZANU-PF people come and say, we will do this, we will do that, we will do that, and then we all drink tea and walk away. And nothing happens. And it's always been the same. When are we going, as Zimbabwe, as a people, going to accept that this is not working? We cannot continue doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result. Einstein called that insanity.
That was Einstein. Well, then time is not our best ally. We have to go to Marvelous Ms. Nyaguye for, video and social media segment. Let's go, Marvelous.
I'm hoping that I'm tall enough, I'm not sure. Hello, everybody. I'm Marvelous Mhlanga Nyaguye. This is what Zimbabweans are saying on social media, and